I wanted to bring a just short perspective on ASL research and why people are interested in doing research on ASL. One of the reasons I'm interested in it is, of course, because it's an interesting language, and as a linguist, I find it very fascinating. But a second, perhaps more important reason is that we, just as we can use language in general as a window on the mind, so we can use sign language in particular as a window on language itself. Okay, so that's why I, as a linguist or a psycholinguist, am interested in ASL. Okay, now when I started doing research on ASL 15 years ago, there were a lot of misconceptions about what ASL was. Most of those misconceptions are not with us much anymore, but let me just mention a few and then we'll see how far we've come. Okay, one was the idea that all signs are iconic. Okay, that means that some people used to think that sign language was just tied to the real world, that you couldn't have discussions in sign language about abstract things. We know that that's not true, and the proof, the best proof that you will see, I think, is the next lecture, which will be on ASL, in ASL, by Ted Sapala. Okay, and he will be talking about a lot of very, very abstract things. Okay. Another misconception was that sign language, because perhaps it was thought to be iconic, was also universal. Okay, that's not true either. Okay, and I'm not going to talk today about different other sign languages, but let me just point out that, for example, British Sign Language is totally different from American Sign Language, even though both are used in communities where English is spoken. Okay, and if you want to see more about foreign sign languages, there will be 8 papers on foreign sign languages at a conference here in Rochester in June, and I have more information about that if you want it. Okay, when I first started working on sign language, there was felt a need to sort of prove that sign language was a real language. Okay, and that led many of us to concentrate our work on areas where sign language was really the same as spoken language. Okay, you can think of this as like a swing of a pendulum. Okay, so 1970 or 72, 73, we really had to prove our own worth as researchers in a way by proving the worth of sign language. Okay, so we showed, hey, even though it's a language in a different mode, still it's the same. Okay, and it's true that sign language can express any idea that spoken language can. And it's also true in some of my very, very early work that the content of a sign message takes about the same time as the content of a spoken message, even though each sign requires twice as much time as each spoken word. Okay, when the pendulum swung back, researchers started saying, well, but it's really different. And maybe it's different because of the modality. So, for example, it was thought that signs are simultaneous, but words are more, or spoken words are more linear. Okay, and that was thought to be related to the fact that in the visual medium, your eyes are very good at catching many simultaneous things, okay? But your ears aren't. On the other hand, your ears are very, very good at analyzing linear events. Okay. That was true in some ways, but it turns out that speech has many more simultaneous aspects than we used to think, and sign has many, many more linear aspects than we used to think. Just to give you a very, very simple example, there is a clear difference between these two signs that have almost opposite meanings. Please look at me. Okay. Okay. Finished. That's very, very simple example. The first one means I give something to you as a present, and the second one means you give something to me as a present. Okay? Very, very opposite meanings. The only difference between those two signs is where they start and where they stop. Okay? And that really has to do with linearity. Okay? We'll come back to that a little bit later in the talk. Okay, we left the pendulum here. Okay, and now it's really sort of swung back a little bit more to say, well, yes, sign language is different from languages like English, but maybe it's really more similar to other exotic languages. Okay, so for example, Betsy McDonald, who will be talking in April, did some comparisons between ASL and Navajo. Okay, and I did some comparisons between ASL and various Creoles. Okay, now I want to concentrate on the main topic of my talk now, okay, and that's showing cause in ASL. The topic of how causation is expressed in ASL is interesting for two reasons, I think. One is that deaf people have been accused of having problems with the concept of cause and effect. I don't think that's true, but even if it were, I frankly wanted to show that that supposed problem couldn't be attributed to a lack of a construction in ASL for that. Okay. My admitted bias was that as a natural language, sign language, ASL, would have some way to express cause and effect. Okay. The second reason why it's interesting is that there is such a variety of different ways that the languages of the world express cause and effect, or cause and result. Okay. I want to show you some of those. Some of them will be familiar to you. Others won't be, and I will sort of explain the examples as we go along. Okay. One way that it can be expressed is just to put the causing part and the result part together. Okay. Juxtaposition. Okay. This is done sometimes in English, and it's the preferred way of doing it in Navajo. Okay. The second example I'll show you is from Ken Hale.
What was that from?
Ken Hale is the person. Okay. So, wait, keep it on the overhead. Okay. Back to me. Ready? Okay, so in the first sentence, you as a reader or viewer or listener infer that there's a connection between Sarah eating the strawberries and getting sick. Okay? Similarly, in the Navajo sentence, you have really two clauses. John's horse threw him and broke his leg. Okay, and again, you as a reader, especially if you're a Navajo reader, will infer that connection. Okay? But sometimes that connection can be more explicit. So one other way is to include the idea of the cause really right in the word in an idiosyncratic way. And that would be something like put. I mean, that's really to cause to become in another place. Okay. All right. Or an example that I'll be showing you later, attract. Attract means that you're causing somebody or something to want to be closer to the thing that's doing the attracting. Okay? All right. Sometimes you have say an affix, an ending on a word, perhaps, that shows cause. Okay? In English, this is not very productive. Okay? But in languages like Japanese, it's entirely productive, meaning that you can add this affix to any word or any verb and make it a causative. Okay? So some examples of the en suffix in English and the saseru suffix in Japanese. S-A-S-E-R-U. Oops. Okay? In sentence number 3, you see that weakened is made into, or weak is made into a causative by adding en. Okay? And what? Oh, it's hard to read? Okay, it's, wait, here, just put it down. Is that better? Okay, sorry. Okay. In the Japanese example, the first one shows just the regular, the cat meowed. And then the second one shows that when you add that suffix, it changes to something making the cat meow. Okay. Now, many languages also have a way of showing cause by actually using something like make. So, number 6. Come back, it's only one sentence. English, whoops. Yes, what? Oh, why we're videotaping? We are videotaping because some people can't come, and for future study. Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. So English uses make, French uses make, or the same idea. Many languages use conjunctions. Okay, and we have a whole list of them in English. I'll show you those examples now. Okay, and some languages use intonation. Okay, I'm going to give you one example from a non-standard dialect of English. It's not my native dialect, but it's my grandparents'. Okay. For the hearing people, I will sort of say the sentences. That question is supposed to give you an idea of the intonation. Okay. You drink chicken soup, you'll stay healthy. Okay. He didn't call his mother, she had a coronary. Okay. Okay, and that special intonation pattern gives you the notion of a connection and a causal connection. Okay. In fact, the ASL way of expressing causatives or causation is not too far from this non-standard dialect, okay, as we will see. Okay. Okay. Oops. Now, how did we get our data? I should say that this paper or this talk is based on some work that I did a long time ago with Joan Foreman. Okay. We wanted to elicit expressions of causation in ASL. Didn't want to use translation from English. So we used pictures. Okay. We had whole bunch of little booklets with a series of pictures that convey the idea of some kind of causation. Maybe no causation. Maybe something just happened, or maybe one thing led directly to another, or maybe somebody convinced somebody to do something. So varying degrees of causation. Okay. Let me show you some examples of the pictures we used. I don't think they'll both, they won't both show. Come out. Hmm? Mm-hmm. Okay, let me show another one. Okay. So, for example, in this second picture, a wife nags her husband because he's poor, so he goes to work, earns a lot of money, becomes rich, so he can give her the fur coats and so on that she wants. Okay, so that's one where somebody coerces somebody else into doing something. Okay. We had 9 native signers that we asked to talk about those little booklets or pictures. And what we got was really surprising to us, because even though it was a very open-ended kind of elicitation procedure, we were controlling for the content but not the form. In fact, the form was very, very similar. Okay. We found a few cases of the put type of thing. So one was sort of the opposite of the dog example we had a minute ago, where a boy holds up a piece of meat, and the dog, please watch me, is attracted by the smell of the meat and goes over and grabs the steak. Okay, so people routinely used the attract by smell sign. Okay. If there was no perceived cause, then we just got a continual sentence without any breaks in it. Okay. Let me show you an example of that on the videotape. Okay. I hope it works. Oh, wrong me. Okay. I'll show you that later. All right. Okay, we also found a kind of verb chaining, okay, like this. Let's watch. Yeah. Scared, zoom off. Scared off, really. Or okay. So push roll. Okay, push roll. So a boy was pushing another boy down a hill, and we got push, roll, roll sometimes with two different rolls. Yeah. Right. I got that from you, so I hope that you agree with it. Okay. All right. Now, the most common thing we found was conjunctions. Okay. And these were really fascinating kinds of conjunctions because they consisted of a manual part of the sign and a non-manual or facial, most of the time, part of the sign that went together. We were fooled when we were trying to transcribe this, because when we were transcribing things, we would put down signs we thought we saw. But it turned out that the manual part wasn't there at all sometimes. We saw the facial expression and we wrote down the sign. We went back and sure enough, the sign or the manual part wasn't there. Let me show you some examples. Now, these are individual signs used as conjunctions. We'll show you the sign with the manual part and then without the manual part. Okay? I'm going to voice the meanings of these for the hearing people. Okay? But I think the deaf people will understand what's intended. Okay? Oh, why is it doing that? Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah. First one is careless. Now here's just the facial expression. Okay. Next is wrong. Just the facial expression. Next is well or so. There's the facial expression. Next is willing. Next is, this is one that this guy uses, go to, he calls it, but it's sort of so we went and did something. Decide. Succeed. Okay, it's very clear. All right. Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. I promised you before that I would show you examples of the no perceived cause. Okay, so let's show you that now. Oops. Okay. Let me explain what you saw. Okay. That was describing a picture of a man in bed watching TV who just happens to fall asleep. It's not that the TV is boring, but he just falls asleep while he's watching TV. So it's watching, sleepy, falls asleep. And there's no facial connection or anything related to that. Okay. Now, I'm going to show you some examples with and without the manual part of the connecting sign. Okay. I will voice the general idea of the sentence for the hearing people. The first one, I believe, is related to the sign careless. Okay, and it's where a casserole is half on a windowsill and just falls off and cracks. Okay, because somebody was careless in putting it there. Okay. First, with the sign. Okay, now without the sign. Okay. All right, let me pause this. Okay, the next one, I think, is the sleeping pill example you saw on the overhead, where a man can't sleep, tossing and turns, decides take a sleeping pill, and it works, and he falls asleep. Okay, so there are really two causes here. The inability to sleep causes him to get up and get the sleeping pill, and the sleeping pill causes him to fall asleep. Okay? First with the manual part, then without the manual part. Okay? Okay, did you see that clearly? Did you see that clearly? The facial expression just stayed right there. And manual part went away, meaning stayed the same. Okay? In some sense, I think we can say that the entire sign has some sort of psychological reality. First, there's the fact that we were fooled into writing it down. Okay. Second, those sentences count as repetitions of each other. I mean, so in fact, the first one we saw with the sign careless, the first time he really did that, this was a demonstration tape, but the first time he really did that without the manual part, then we asked him to repeat it, and he did it with the manual part. Without asking, I mean, we hadn't noticed that yet. Okay. All right. Second, we showed those non-manual behaviors to other signers. Even in isolation, they were able to say, oh yes, that means, okay. All right. And another thing that makes me think that it's psychologically real is that we were able to make this videotape in about 5 minutes, so that it had some reality for the person in the videotape. Okay. Well, why is this of any interest? Well, it's sort of fun, but also it relates to previous work on sign language and lets us include a lot of things that we used to think were really different under the same category. And secondly, we can relate it to recent developments in spoken language linguistics, so that we can both use those new tools to look at sign language and, in fact, use sign language to help clarify things in regular linguistics. Okay. First of all, the idea of a non-manual behavior occurring by itself and having meaning of its own is not new. Okay, I'm not saying that it is. Scott Liddell worked on relative clauses in ASL and found that there was one facial expression that looks like this that was used for relative clauses. Okay. He also found the careless facial expression and just called it an adverb, a facial adverb. You remember that one? Okay. But we have seen that it's really sort of connected to the sign careless. The sign sort of drops out and it leaves the facial expression to carry the meaning. Okay. It also in the work of Baker and Patton, and also some of my work on conditionals, that's if-then kinds of sentences, we see that there are facial things that show syntactic structure. And even like the old-time things about negation and question facial expressions. You can show the difference between a sentence and a question only with facial expression. Okay. Now the question is, are all of these other kinds of non-manual behaviors really disconnected to sign, or maybe what happened was that they used to be connected to signs and some of the manual parts disappeared, leaving the facial expression to function as a meaning-bearing unit by itself. That's in fact what happened historically in the development of Chinese tones. They used to be secondary to the meaning, and then they became primary. Okay. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the battery in my watch. What time is it? Does anybody have the time? What? 10? Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right. But I'm running low on time. But one area in spoken language linguistics that gives us tools to analyze sign language is something that's called autosegmental phonology. What's that? Okay, that's a big word. All right, and it describes some very, very interesting phenomena. Okay. If you know spoken English, you know that there are some differences between words like permit, the verb, and permit, the noun. Okay? Or torment, the verb, and torment, the noun. Okay, let me just show that. If I can find them. I'm missing an overhead. Oops. Where did it go? Oh, it was here. Where did I put it? Oh, here. Nope. Yes. Oh, it's under my watch. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so. Okay. All right, so you've seen that. Yes. Lower? Okay. Back to me. Yes. Yes. Okay. Now we can really think of that stress pattern, the low-high or the high-low, as having the meaning by itself of noun or verb. And then, yes, true biz. And then the sounds that you just make with your mouth are the sort of the lexical meaning of that word. And then it just sort of gets tied. Okay. Well, oh, sorry. Thank you. All right. Okay, thank you. This happens in English occasionally. It's not a very regular process, but in a lot of African languages, it happens very, very regularly. So, for example, in a language I'm sure you all know, Igbo, the difference between a declarative and an interrogative is only in the tone of the first word. Okay, so let me show you that. I can pronounce this barely. All right. So, oh, wait, oh, sorry. Watch it. Okay. Back to me. Okay. So if you look at the first word there, that's the only difference. I'll say them for you. Ohuruva versus Ohuruva. Did you hear that? I'll do it again. Ohuruva, Ohuruva. Okay. All right. So that the question part is in the tone only. Okay. There are more complicated examples in Arabic. I may skip those and talk about that during the discussion session this afternoon if people are interested. I'll show you the overhead, but oh, wait. You don't want to look at that now, right? Okay. Let me just explain briefly that in Arabic, the vowels carry like verb tense and things like that. The consonants have the word meaning, and what's called the skeleton, or sorry, I didn't call it that there, the template, which provides timing slots for consonants and vowels, that's what gives you things like changing a noun to a verb, or changing a noun or a verb to a causative verb. Okay, so that's sort of derivation versus the inflection that's in the vowels. Okay, well, that starts looking like the kind of thing that we have, in fact, in ASL. Okay. Right. The difference in ASL is that in languages like Arabic or Igbo, if a tone or a vowel or something doesn't have something to attach to, it can't occur, it can't show up. Okay. But in ASL, it can. Okay? So we saw that in those examples with the facial expression for decide occurring just by itself, that there was no problem. There, the reason, I think, is, again, because of the modality. All right? So that says to linguistics that the levels of things like sound or speech sound and tone are really very separate, but they just happen to show up a little bit more coordinated in spoken language because of the limitations of speech and not the limitations of language. Okay, and that's, I think, an important thing to say. Okay. I should also say that we saw in the Igbo examples and also in the Arabic that perhaps one sound or one tone will spread to an entire series of vowels, let's say. Okay. Well, in ASL, one facial expression can spread to show the scope of a syntactic structure. Okay. So, for example, in a question, okay, suppose I have a question like where I've already mentioned ice cream. Okay, and I want to ask you which flavor you prefer. Okay. So I'm not questioning the ice cream. Okay, I'm assuming the ice cream, and I'm asking you which flavor you prefer. Okay. The question facial expression will not cover the ice cream, but it will cover the rest of the sentence. Let me give you the example, okay? And maybe some of you native signers can do it better than me, but watch. Okay, did you see that shift in the facial expression? So there was no questioning on the ice cream. You want me to do it again? No? Yes? Okay. I feel a little awkward because there's so many better signers than me, but anyway. So there was a shift in facial expression, and that is matched by the difference in the structure. Okay, so that we are using a kind of auto-segmental process for syntax instead of a sub-lexical structure. Okay, and that's new. That hasn't been done in regular linguistics before. But the same concept can also be used for sub-lexical structure as well. And that relates to some very, very exciting recent work by Scott Liddell, who has been working on the linearity of sign language. Okay? So instead of consonants and vowels, he has movements and holds. Okay, look at that. So, if we have a sign like throw, which starts out here, has a movement, and simultaneously, or ends up here, okay, but with different hand shapes, we can see that the transition to the new hand shape takes place during the movement, and that's reflected by these lines. Okay, so we start out, hold, I'll do it in slow motion, hold, there, okay. Most of the time, the same hand shape will be sort of copied or spread onto the whole sign, right? So if we have a sign like don't know, then it will keep the same hand shape. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to add one more thing, and you see that here in the overhead, that it may be necessary for both signed languages and spoken language to have a separate level of representation for each independent articulator. Okay. So for spoken language, you may have to have a separate thing for the nose. I mean, not the nose wiggling, but the nasality. Okay. In sign language, you may have to have a separate level for eyebrows, eyes opening, mouth movement, and so on, because they can function independently, as this last example shows. We have a case where there's this is supposed to mean, you like apples, don't you? Okay? And the head nod covers like apples. Okay? And the question covers the whole thing, so it's separate. And it looks like this, sort of. Okay, do you want me to do it again? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let me turn this off. All right, so what? Oh, turn it on in just a second. sorry. Okay. So we've seen that, in fact, results from research on ASL can help general linguistic theory in that you can show that levels of representation are really independent. More evidence can be provided from sign language than can be provided from spoken language. And also at the same time that we can use this tool from spoken language to shed more light on phenomena in sign language. Okay, so why don't I stop here, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have after I get a drink of water. Wait. Oh, what? Oh, you have a question? Okay. Meg?
You were saying that facial expressions alone can express an idea.
Mm-hmm.
But they would only express an idea, not a thing. In other words, they would express a feeling or a relationship, but not an object.
Not necessarily.
Can you give me an example of a facial expression that describes alone, without the manual
Yes.
sign, that would explain
That would give a concept of a thing?
jug? Not a broken jug, but a jug.
Okay. Jug, no. But the only example I can think of is not a very nice one. And because I'm a very, very nice person, I can't remember the facial expression. There is one. Does anybody know? Okay. All right. That is a facial expression that means whore. Or something else. Yeah, but there aren't that many, and I think it's interesting that most of them are either adverbial or conjunctions, like I showed before.
They express a quality,
More than
idea, in other words, as opposed
Yes.
to the thing itself. Basically, you can break it down.
yeah.
It sounds like.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm supposed to be repeating the question. Excuse me? It's obvious enough. Okay, thank you. If it's an idea, some of them are really awfully concrete kinds of ideas, like the carelessly, for example, is really, you could ultimately tie it back to like the way that an action is performed sometimes. But it's true. I hadn't thought of that. Yes?
Okay. Related to classroom instruction. I'm sorry.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, related to classroom instruction, I was wondering about putting into classroom instruction,
Wait a
dealing
minute,
with two different
what?
kinds of students.
Oh, mixed class?
Teaching class, in the classroom with two different
Observing students. Yeah.
Observing? Yeah, just looking around at the students, seeing two broad categories of students. Students who do have good receptive skills for English, with what you mentioned, the causality of impact and rules in English, versus way sign language deals with causality. I think sometimes one group of students have difficulty understanding cause and effect in sign, and another group might have difficulty understanding cause and effect in ASL. And the groups who understand it in each system understand one, but not both. I'm wondering how we can get students to understand the relationship of cause and effect, all students in both sign and in English.
Yeah. That's a very good point. I think that we have to differentiate between problems with a specific language and problems with a specific concept. Okay? We know that there are a lot of people, hearing people learning a second language, or deaf people who haven't yet learned sign, who have concepts but don't yet have the means of expressing them or understanding the expression of that concept in another language. Okay, they understand the concept, but they may not understand how that concept is expressed in a particular language. Okay, for example, my English is pretty good. Okay, my Dutch is a little bit not wonderful. Okay, I have no problem understanding how cause and effect or effect are expressed in English. But I can promise you, I have a lot of problem with Dutch. Okay, so I think in the case that you're talking about, it's a problem not with the concept, but with linking that concept to a specific language. Do you disagree?
Yes, a little bit. No.
Your son connected with the classroom. Do you want me to sign while I'm doing it? Sure, turn it on. Yes, of course.
He wanted me to. He
Yes.
wanted me to speak closer to the microphone.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay, really, I have another question that relates to cause and effect. I'd like to know if there's any research that indicates that for classroom instruction, the use of ASL or the use of English or using both,
In parallel, yeah.
both methods, if any of those are really, if either method or a combination of both is really better in terms of students' receptive skills.
Or if
It seems like both end up with the same result, but given individual students, which is the better method?
Okay, I think you can anticipate my answer. It's going to depend on the student. Okay, again, if you come back to, say, my example of myself, I will learn much better in English than I will in Dutch because I'm better in English. But a Dutch person would be the opposite. So if you have, say, a mixed class, I mean, it might be nice to have two parallel teachers, one ASL and one PSE or something. That's probably impossible most of the time, so you have to sort of come in between. But in any case, I think that you really have to gear it to the individual student. And if you have, say, a class that's really strong in English and weak in ASL, don't use ASL. It's not going to help. But if you have a class that's strong in ASL and maybe so-so in English, if you want to get the concept across, you will use more ASL because that's going to link better with their best language system. Yeah. So I think it's a linguistic and not a conceptual problem. Mimi.
Susan, the other day in one of my advanced sign language classes I had.
Could you speak louder,
Yes.
please, Mary?
The other day in one of my advanced sign language classes, I had one student,
Yeah.
even though we tried
That's
very,
okay.
very hard to avoid this happening, who saw the word not yet, not yet, and sign not yet. We try not to have that link, automatic link between the English and the not yet, because this can mean other things. But he was doing it that way, and each time he signed this, he had this. And he insisted on putting it there, whether it fit or not. And I didn't know what you had done in research before, But the one or two times that he used it with the tongue thrust, I thought, it doesn't mean that. And then I thought, but there are other times when it is appropriate.
Yeah.
Can you address that?
Okay, that's another one where the sign can drop and the facial expressions stay. So if somebody, yeah, but I'll come back to that. If somebody asks you, have you been there? I can answer, okay, and mean, not yet. Okay, I don't know when it's required and when it's not.
Well, I
Yes.
had a thought.
You had a thought?
I said that
Okay.
it would be required when the person actually meant, not yet because I have been procrastinating. False.
Yeah, so it's almost related to the careless.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Good idea. I hadn't thought of that, but
Because there are
Yeah.
times when you would say, have you been there? And they go, no. And there is no tongue thrust.
without a tongue. Yeah.
But it does not mean
That it's been postponed. Yeah. That's an interesting point. I'd like to think about it. I don't have an answer for it now. Ruth?
A long time ago, Charlotte Baker had a paper where she said that the tongue thrust was only for the meaning, the English meaning,
Not yet.
and it only meant
Right.
late.
Yes.
That's very tied to a specific English translation.
Right, and that's, yeah, I had a paper where I argued against that specifically. Charlotte Baker said that the tongue was used for the meaning not yet, and without the tongue was used for the meaning late. One person once told me that the repetition was used for not yet, and signing it once meant late, so that not yet, late. I think I have seen what people say they do, and I have seen what people actually do. And what people actually do is use them both. I think that and try to make a distinction based on the English that's not there in ASL. There is a unitary meaning. Something is not completed by the time it was supposed to be. And that includes both late and not yet. Okay? And it just happens that English has two words for that, ASL has one. I think that it may be that Mimi's idea of having the tongue thrust, it's hard to say. Some things you can't talk and sign at the same time. That having the tongue thrust sequentially will occur if you're feeling guilty about it or something, or if something is sort of too late. But that's another sign. Okay. So that may be related to a more adverbial feeling, but I think that, in fact, it can be bad to tie the sign too much to the English, and that's really part of what you were saying. Steve?
Susan, did I understand you to say that making a parallel between expression, facial expression, non-manual markers in ASL, and tone of voice in spoken language?
Not intonation, but
Okay.
tone.
Okay, tone. So I think you've already answered the question. Let me finish it to make sure I'm
Okay.
seeing the right distinction. You said that facial expression could exist without signs, but that the limitation of speech was that tone could not. So that an example where, let's take as an arbitrary example, ice cream is replaced by let's take ice cream.
Yeah.
Where the tone, what I was calling the tone, is serving to mean an arbitrary example. Because a lot of times when you listen to English, no word is said, but a lot of different tones are expressed. Or I'm hearing the word.
Well, just now you said ice cream, so I didn't hear any difference in tone between the first example and the second. Okay. Okay.
I think this sentence came from something you said earlier. At one point earlier you said, let's say ice cream. I might interpret that, or I interpret that to mean, let's take an arbitrary example.
Okay, so I see what
It's a
you
lot
mean,
of
yeah.
meaning. I hear a lot of meaning in tone all the time. It's
Yeah. What you
to
heard
interpret it.
What you heard was meaning in a pause, in fact. There was no tone difference at all. Let's say ice cream. Okay, I mean, sometimes you can even hear the capital letters. They have a, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to sign. They have a meaningful relationship. Okay, I mean, you can almost hear the capital letters, right? So that is used for certain things in English. I can even give you one example of intonation expressing an idea by itself in English without any mouth movements, okay? And it's this, I don't know. Okay, but there are very, very few, very, very few of those. Yeah, okay.
I'm thinking of lots of times, what is
Yeah.
it when a person, I'm not sure it's just pause, but there's an actual expression, like a person goes, and then says something. Now, the same thing said without that phrase may or may not have different
Okay,
intonation.
yeah, that's more like affect. Okay, and it's not necessarily or emphasis or something like that. That clearly happens. I mean, there is a difference between regular stress and emphatic stress, even in sign language, like I just showed you. Okay, so emphatic stress, I mean, that's giving you an idea of how I feel and what I am stressing. All right, so there is that in English. I'm not denying it, but it doesn't really, I mean, it has, if I say something louder, it means I'm stressing it, but it's not giving something like tense or mood. In some other African languages, the difference between active and passive is in the tone. Okay, and we don't have anything like that in English. Okay, but they have it in other languages. Sam?
I don't understand why so many researchers started studying ASL recently. How come that didn't start 100 years ago, like perhaps with English or other spoken languages?
Good question. One thing is that it did start earlier in Sweden. Okay. And in fact, I mean, I started studying sign language 15 years ago, but people like Stokey and Tervoort started studying it 25 or 30 years ago. That's still not a very long time ago, it's true. I think, just a minute, I think that one reason was the attitude toward what sign language is and, in fact, is not. Okay? You had the same attitude, interestingly. Linguists didn't start really studying Creole languages, spoken Creole languages, as separate languages until maybe 30 or 40 years ago. And they've been studying other languages for over 1,000 years. So I think it's a social attitudinal question and not a linguistic question. You could argue, in fact, that that the reason for new interest in studying sign language was related to other minority language kinds of situations. I'm not sure that's true. I know it wasn't in my case. In my case, and the people I worked with 15 years ago, it was really because it told us something about how the mind works. I think that's, well, I mean, it's a different kind of reason. I think both are equally valid. There's another. Bottom
I think the bottom line is that ASL is an oppressed language because of the oralism and the oral philosophy for years in Europe, and most of Europe didn't use sign language. And I think that's the reason that no one started research on sign language.
I like to think, maybe this is too arrogant, but I like to think that some of the research on sign language helped to legitimize it as a language and provided arguments in favor of its use against oralism.
We need to stop now.
Oh. Is that why you were interrupting? Okay, thank you.